The National Museum of Funeral History presents The Final Curtain Never Closes. I'm your host, Genevieve Keeney Vasquez, the president and CEO of the museum. Today, I'm joined by a guest who I was on her podcast. And so when I learned about her more in talking with her, I found her background to be so enriching and very, very interesting. So I asked if she wouldn't mind being a podcast on The Final Curtain Never Closes. So today, I'd like to welcome Ashley Gould.
Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have you back. I mean, I loved our conversation that we had. And for the listeners who want to know about the podcast you and I recorded, why don't you go ahead and tell them where they can find it?
Yeah. So my podcast is called On the Table with Ashley. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And I think they're going to love listening to our conversation. It was really special.
Yes, it was. And what I find that the interesting contrast here is your whole concept is like, I believe it's just bringing people back together and bringing them back to the place where so many conversations are had. And that's the table, right? Whether it be there for breakfast, but gathering for some tea, or gathering for dinner, where if you look back in time, that's when a lot of conversations happen. That's where you learn about each other's day. But I think more so we find it today that it's more important to have some of those hard discussions, right? Is that kind of like the premises of your On the Table and the subject matter that you're currently talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, I think number one, as a society, we used to sit down for dinner every night as a family, and that's happening less and less.
Oh, yes.
And so I think that's one thing. And then I think the second thing is I have just found, even before COVID, but accelerated by COVID, that we've just become isolated from each other. And we also have become focused on our own perspectives and less open, less curious, and less open to hearing other people's perspectives. And I think it's so important to do that. We learn by learning from others and listening to them. Whether or not we agree with them, we should be able to respectfully discuss anything.
Yeah, and I think also, when we look at things, even in our society, how we are, the information age that we're in, the way we can perceive information, filter information, gather information, I think sometimes the news or the way this information is delivered to us is also starting to kind of focus in on how we can't agree with each other because of our differences, right? We're seeing more and more of that being on a worldwide display.
Well, and I actually think, unfortunately, the direction that news has gone with social media, and we're constantly barraged with the headline, the opinion, and then we're served up more of what we like, of what we believe. And so we're less exposed to other perspectives. And we kind of go down our own rabbit hole. And that, I think, makes it actually harder to sit down at the table and have a discussion with somebody that you don't agree with, because we're just losing practice, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Practice, I think, is a very poignant word that you just spoke about, because we're seeing that so many people, especially the younger generations, that they don't have the abilities to sit down in a social environment and actually sit in front of somebody and have that conversation, because they're so used to having that conversation in a very shortened version over a text or through a quick message or a quick video recording that they send you, right? So you're really losing that personal touch, that personal engagement in conversation, like face to face.
Yeah, I completely agree. And fundamentally, my focus is on increasing human connection. And we need to do that. It's great that we have FaceTime and we can talk over Zoom and Riverside, but face-to-face is really unique and special. And I think we are losing a lot of that.
When it's interesting because, COVID tore us all apart, right? We were forced to be isolated. And then we found all this amazing technology, like you said, FaceTime and all these, WebEx ways to have these meetings and somewhat connect us again or keep us connected. I think it's great in a pandemic environment. However, I think that, like you said, we've become so used to it and so reliant upon it. It's now serving an injustice to us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think there's a place for it. You and I would not have been able to talk.
Right.
And I learned so much from you, and I'm so grateful. And it's still so important to sit down face to face because, number one, there's just no way to replace it. And number two, I think we leave space for unplanned discussion face to face. Whereas if we're on a Zoom or a FaceTime, we're so focused on our agenda that we don't really necessarily get to the things that just organically come up.
And also when you're on like these platforms too, you also have a timeline. You have a start time and you have a stop time. And I think when you're at the table, there is no start and stop time, right? I mean, maybe when the food gets cold or something, but
just pour another glass of wine.
Exactly. Transition over to dessert. Keep it going. Yeah. So I really am intrigued to understand your journey to bringing you to On the Table and your amazing business that you have as well. So I learned that you were a lawyer and somehow within that journey, you transitioned into Ashley On the Table. So can you tell us about that journey? Because I'm really curious.
Yeah. So I practiced law for over 20 years. And, both my father and stepfather were lawyers. And I kind of say when I was graduating from college, I had so little imagination. I loved them both and respected them. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to law school. And I loved law school. I may be one of the rare people, but my parents were also divorced when I was 3. And during law school, I ended up living with my dad and my stepmom. And that was such a wonderful experience because I hadn't done that before. So at least not full time. So there were so many layers of why law school was amazing. And I actually loved practicing. And it was a way for me to take care of my family. And I believe that we have seasons in life, and I'm over 50 and in the second half of my life. And in the first half of my life, I was really focused on building my career and being able to take care of my family. And so I thought less about how fulfilling it was for me and, was it what I wanted to end my life doing? And then we moved during COVID. We moved from California to Utah, and I didn't want to take the bar again. Oh. And I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And my mom, growing up, had a beautiful stationery and gift shop. And she also set a beautiful table and was just so innately good at welcoming people into our home and sitting around the table. And I feel like I combined those things after going through COVID with the isolation. And so I wanted to focus on human connection in 2 ways. One is the podcast On the Table with Ashley, where we try to talk about things we don't normally talk about. And the second is my brand, Âme Attend, which is French for to take care of your soul, where I design products that are made in small batch production all over the world with a few things in mind. One is that everything is dishwasher and microwave safe, so you can use, it's like elevated every day. You can use it every day. And 2, we're really thoughtful about every product because we want it to enhance your gatherings. So I really believe objects can make us feel better and feel closer, especially when they are really thoughtfully made. So how a glass feels in your hand, how you can pick up a serving board and it's easy to use and beautiful and well made, all of these things. And there's a book I read by Glenn Adamson called Fewer Better Things. And I really love this ethos that we don't need a lot, but if we have really, really high quality things that we surround ourselves with every day, it enhances our well-being and it puts us in a better frame of mind to connect more meaningfully with others.
Yeah, and that's very well said. And when you think about it, there's always that famous saying, "Less is more,"
Yeah.
right? And I know for some people, it's the concept might not resonate with them, but that's what I took away from what you were just talking about. Because if you're not distracted by all of the excess stuff, right, that pulls you away or makes you feel like you don't want to entertain in your home because you have too much stuff around, and you don't feel your home is worthy for having guests and stuff like that. Maybe if you can adapt that less is more concept and start focusing on the things that really matter and are important to you, then perhaps you would want to open your door and share that with others and have a whole new sense of life and connecting with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was stationed in Germany, I remember going and buying these beautiful sets of dishes for entertaining. And I never used them because I didn't want the kids to break them. I have 4 children. And so I always kept them away because I was like, one day when it's safe enough to bring them out, I'll bring them out and start utilizing them and setting them on the tables and stuff like that. And so when kids are all grown now, I have grandkids now, and I brought the dishes down now. They're not in safekeeping anymore. They're actually in my cabinet for everyday use. And interesting enough, I had this beautiful set of glasses, crystal glasses, and it's just my husband and I. And it was a set of 6, and now I'm down to 2, and I'm like, oh, who's breaking these glasses now? And I accidentally knocked them over, and here, the glasses are being broken. But at the same time, I started to kind of release my hold on trying to preserve these beautiful pieces that are meant for entertaining. And sometimes I look back and I wish I would have brought them out with my children around so they could have joined them as well. And if they break, so it be. At least you got to use them and enjoy them while you could and what they're meant to do, right? But I really think about what we talked about a little bit in the podcast when I started learning about your business and all is, don't save that good china for a rainy day or for when the kids are all grown, because you never may make it to enjoy that china and what it's meant to do, which is entertain and bring people together.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's why I'm really trying on everything that I create to be dishwasher and microwave safe so that you can use it every day, because I have the same thing. I have all these beautiful things I was given for my wedding and I never use them because I don't want to hand wash everything. It's just like, even more than it breaking, it's more, I don't want to deal with how to clean it properly. And whether you have things that need to be hand washed or you're afraid of breaking them, I just totally agree. Just use them. And I think it's really tied with, what you're doing with the museum and with your podcast and talking about death, which is something I talk about a lot on my podcast as well, is just, we don't know how much time we have. We should enjoy to the fullest every day and find the beauty and the magic in every single day. And part of that is not being afraid to use the things that we quote unquote save for the holidays and just use them every day. Enjoy them every day.
Exactly. And I still have some bottles of wine that I haven't opened, and I'm like, why am I saving these bottles of wine? I need to pop them and drink them, because either one, they're going to get to where they're non-drinkable anymore, or it's just, I may never see the day I get to drink them because I might not be here, Right. And I think that, there's a lot of things that we do in life that we probably don't understand why we do them, but hopefully by listening to podcasts, whether it's You're on the Table with Ashley or my podcast, The Final Curtain Never Closes, hopefully something that we are talking about resonates with you and gives you an aha moment that says, whoa, why am I doing that? You know, why am I not entertaining? I found it interesting. You had a list of questions for me for my podcast. And one of the questions that you had for me was, do I like to entertain? Do you remember my response? And I thought, how shallow of me. I said, it's too much work. It's a lot of work to entertain. So, is there perhaps some tips you could give myself and perhaps some of the listeners to help understand that, you know, entertaining can be simple. Entertaining can be fun. Entertaining can not be an arduous task.
Yeah.
Can you break that down?
Totally. So I always like to ask that question because people's responses vary so widely, and I get a lot of tips too. So I would say the top tips are you don't have to have a clean house. Everybody feels like my house has to be perfect if I'm going to invite people into it. And it's actually not true. In fact, I've heard many people say they feel more comfortable in a house that's not perfectly clean because it's almost like you feel this guilt that you made the person clean to have you over and or that they're a better housekeeper than you are. So I think don't get caught up in having a perfect house. Also, don't get caught up in having a perfect meal. There is no such thing. As long as the food is edible, then people will be happy to be there. It's really much more about the people and the gathering than it is about the food. And I think people get really, really caught up in these elaborate meal planning. And then the timing gets complicated. And then you're not present for your guests and you're stressed out. And then that's not a win. So I really try when I do dinner parties to make things ahead that I can reheat. If there's one or two things I have to make to finish off, that's fine. But I think the most important thing is being completely present when your guests arrive, greeting them at the door, and not worrying about what's on the stovetop. And it sounds like a little thing, but it really sets the tone for the gathering. The other great tip I've had is make it a potluck. You don't have to do all the cooking. So have people bring things, and it's not something we're so used to in certain parts of the country. In the South, I think they're much, much better at allowing for other people to help and bring potlucks. Let people help you clean, which is another thing, because it can be at the end of the evening, you have like all these dishes and it just feels overwhelming. Or don't do dinner. Do cocktails or do dessert or do tea during the day. You know, there's no rule that you have to have like a sit-down dinner party. So I really feel like it's just start, like probably a lot of what you talk about, right? It's just start somewhere. Start with something that you're comfortable with. Keep it small. And if that is a successful gathering, you'll want to do more. Another tip, and we talked a little bit about this, there's this beautiful book called The Joy of Gathering, and the author talks about having some intention for your gathering. So maybe you have one question that you tell your guests in advance, and you're going to talk about that at your gathering. And you will be surprised how vulnerable people will be if you give them a little bit of advance warning. Another one that I've seen is, you have like a name card, and on the back of the name card is everybody has a question. And at dessert, you flip it over and you just sort of go around the table. And it's the same thing. If it's something that everybody is doing, then people actually share and you learn things about them that you, even if you've known them for 10 years, that you never knew. And that is a really special experience.
Yeah, I find that interesting when you were talking about how to be present, right? I've always allowed myself to be all consumed in the kitchen. And, my favorite, I should say is my favorite, but it's probably my only really true day that I stay in the kitchen and actually cook is Thanksgiving dinner. My kids always know Mom's always in the kitchen. But I would be all consumed within the kitchen, and the kids would be out, now that they're all grown, they would be, in the house having conversations and stuff like that. And I would overhear conversations, but I was never really present. And so I think that that's an important takeaway, even for myself, that I need to start being present and start, allowing other people to help and get more involved and stuff. So that's a really neat, interesting concept that I need to adopt myself for certain. But, we're talking about, conversations that we have and maybe questions that you have. So meshing our two worlds together. How about any of those questions? How would you bring up the question of perhaps death within the family, or some information you want to kind of get people to start talking about? What if, somebody's been terminally diagnosed and they want to, share it with the family, but they really don't know how? Do you have any experience with that? Since we're talking about conversations, we're talking about having gatherings, but let's take it into, what about the harder conversations that need to be had?
Yeah, I think that a terminal diagnosis is probably a little bit different than just talking about preparing for death. And I guess we can take both of them. And I think I shared this when we talked, but my dad died 11 years ago. He had a rare cancer. So we went through this as a family when he had to tell us about it. And he had an episode at work where he had fainted, and it took tests and tests and tests, because he had a very rare cancer, for them to find it out. And I remember when they finally did get a diagnosis, and it was not a good diagnosis. He ended up outliving his prognosis by many years, but they gave him 3 to 5 years when they first gave him his diagnosis. And I was a relatively young lawyer at the time, and I remember having that conversation, and it was initially over the phone, which I don't think I would recommend if it's possible to do in person. But I think the most important thing is, if you're the person with the diagnosis, it has to be something that you are comfortable with. And obviously, confronting a diagnosis is an extremely difficult thing to do. So I think the first priority is the person with the diagnosis choosing the best method for sharing the information. I think a lot of times parents want to protect their children, so they don't want them to worry, and they don't want to tell them. My personal feeling is sharing that information as soon as you feel comfortable is extremely helpful, for you as the person with the diagnosis and for your loved ones. So whether that's creating a gathering and sharing the information, or sharing some information before, but the details in person. Everybody doesn't live close together, so that's not always also possible. But I think over the phone, in person are definitely preferred to, an email or a letter or something of that nature. But I also think it's important to say, there is no right or wrong. I spoke to a palliative care doctor on my podcast, and he kept talking about how he has to meet his patients where they are. Some of his patients who are about to die never can admit that they're about to die and never confront it. And some of them are very, very open. So I think when it comes to death, we have to be very open-minded, and we need to allow people the space to do what feels right for them. But my experience in talking with a lot of different people, and my personal experience, is that the more we talk about it, the more peace we have. And also the more time we have to share stories and more memories, and to sort of make the most of those, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it definitely does. Because one of the thoughts that came into my head was, a lot of times, people are, notorious and historically proven to gather for the holidays, right? So if you're someone with a terminal diagnosis, and this is the opportunity for you to do it in person, and the family, your support system is all around you. But then there's always that, well, I don't want to ruin the holidays, right? Don't want to put that on as a reminder so that every time they celebrate a holiday, that's what they remember. So I think I'm wondering if there's any good advice that we could give listeners, be it right or wrong, but I don't think there is a right or wrong. I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying, that it's the preference. But is there any historical experiences or information that you've heard about with some of your podcast on the death rituals around the world? Any conversations you had that might lead into, helping people say yes or no on sharing information about death?
So I had a woman on my podcast. Her name is Susan Turnbull, and her focus is on ethical wills. And if your listeners don't know what an ethical will is, all it is an intentional communication. So it could be a poem, it could be a letter, it could be a video recording that you make. I mean, it could take really any form. And she suggests doing this anytime, like as soon as possible, honestly. And you can update them over time. So you can do it when your child is born, and then do it when they're 10, and then, whenever you want. But I also just finished this amazing book called For You When I'm Gone, 12 Essential Questions to Tell a Life Story. It's by Steve Letter. And in each chapter, he goes through one of these questions. And the goal at the end is that you have enough to make your ethical will. So I think this idea of an ethical will, which is really like, what do you want people to know about you and who you are and who you were? What do you want them to remember about you? Is such a beautiful project. And I think if you can do that, now you could create an ethical will, a different one for your children, for example, than for like family, friends, or relatives that aren't as close. But you could also just, especially if you have a diagnosis, you could create one that you share with your family before the holiday, and you could send it by email. It could be one paragraph, one page. It could be whatever you want. And then you can basically invite people to have conversations with you if they want to, in advance. So I agree that like Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate, people hopefully are very joyous on those occasions. And I can see people not wanting to sort of quote unquote bring the mood down. But I also, as you're saying, it's a beautiful opportunity to have really meaningful conversations. And if you do have a terminal diagnosis, what an opportunity to be able to do that. So I think what I would do is send something out in advance, letting people know about my diagnosis and some form of my ethical will, and inviting them to talk with me. One of the things I've learned about talking about death is that obviously, and this, people generally don't want to do it. And it's not just if you have a diagnosis, but it's, I've talked to a mother who lost her 11-year-old child to cancer. I've talked to someone who lost their parents to suicide, like all kinds of situations. And isolation is the biggest thing that I feel people feel if people don't talk to them. And so I actually think inviting the conversation is the best way to go about it. If people don't want to, you're not going to force them to, right? But if you give them the invitation and a little bit of an opening, like if you create an ethical will and you say, I've really tried to spend my life focused on family and service, or whatever it is, that's an invitation for them to ask you about what some of those things mean to you and what they can take away from it. So that's what I would do. So
instead of making it like you're dropping a bomb, right, on the holiday and making the family remember that's the day they got the news, it's more about, this is the day we shared more about our family members' life. This is a day we all came together and surrounded them with love and stories and memories, because we all have found out that either the death is imminent and is going to happen, or or they did pass away, and we're taking that opportunity to share amongst us. Unfortunately, some people don't get that opportunity, to share ahead of time, and what a blessing in disguise, if you will, if you're able to have that opportunity, right, to share.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the questions in this book is, how do you want people to remember you? And that could be as specific as, remember me when I was 40 and on the beach wearing this, or it could be, remember that I love to garden, or whatever. And what that does is it gives people a memory to go to. So they're not going to, at Thanksgiving when you told me you had a terminal illness, they can go to, this is how this person wants us to remember them. Mm-hmm. And like their happy place, whatever that is.
Yeah. And I think, just having this conversation with you, I've already started to see how one can basically flip their thought process, right? You've basically taken a conversation about death that nobody wants to talk about. And we said, let's turn it into a gathering where we've brought guests together. We ask those hard questions. And some of them are simple questions that you throw in there, right? It's kind of like a little bit of fun with a little bit of some of those curious questions that unfortunately have death undertones to them. But they're important they're just as important as the fun questions, right? Because I think that they help us come closer together, I think, when we can talk about death and talk about those hard questions and actually get to know people in a way that we never thought before. Interesting enough, for myself, it wasn't over a dinner conversation, unfortunately, but we were at a table. It was myself and my two daughters. We were sitting at the table in the funeral home across from the funeral director for planning my mother's service. And I, being the mother of my children and always being thoughtful in what would happen to my children if they were to pass away before they married and had their own life, I still was in that mindset. And I just kind of never, I want to say, updated it, right? I didn't update my own personal thought process. And I said, well, I would like to get a piece of property that has enough niche spaces for my kids and their significant others, their spouses, their children, whatever. And one of my daughters looked at me. She said, "Mom, I don't want to be in a niche space." And I said, "What? You don't?" She goes, "No." She goes, "I want to be scattered. I want to be scattered. I don't want she didn't want to be stuck anywhere. She wanted to just be free." And I was shocked, and I thought, oh my gosh, I never asked that question. How shallow of me to still be thinking of what she would have wanted. But it really wasn't what she wanted. It's what I wanted for my children. But again, I never updated it, and I should have. And now she's in her late 30s, and I'm still thinking like she's still in her, younger adolescent years. And here, I should have had that conversation a long time ago.
I mean, number one, I think that's a gift that your mom gave to you and to your daughters. And I like to think of it that way, right? Because you were in this place because your mother died. And she gave you this opening to have this conversation. And now you know something that you didn't know. And I think when it comes to death, the main thing is, and we talked about this, when somebody we love dies, we want to honor them. And we want to honor them the way that they want to be honored. But we can't do that if we don't talk about it and if we don't ask the questions. And I know people are so uncomfortable, but I just guarantee you will be so happy that you do it.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was able to talk pretty much openly with my mom, and I've always felt like I could talk openly about it with my children because of my profession, and they've been exposed to it to some degree. But I didn't realize that as they got older, their views on things for themselves personally changed. And I think that's important too, to know that what the conversations that you have today may not, and the answers you get today might not be applicable 5 to 10 years from now, right?
Absolutely.
People's mindset changes, their opinions changes, their family dynamics change. And so I think it's important that, we've had this conversation last Thanksgiving, or the last time we were all together, we had this conversation. We don't have to have it again. And I think that isn't true. I think it's a constant evolving conversation that needs to happen just as regular as, hey, when are we going to have grandkids, or when so-and-so wanting to get married, or what college do you want to go to, or, oh, but by the way, what do you want done with you when you die?
Right.
Do you want to be cremated or buried? Right?
And I
It should
think
be right after what college you want to go to, right?
I think the more we talk about it, the less taboo it becomes. And I spoke with a woman named Ashley Kirkham who lives in Utah, and she's the only person that I've met, and I bet you have met people like this, who is completely unafraid of death. And she said, number one, she has very strong beliefs in the afterlife in her religion, and she really believes that she will see her loved ones again. But also in her family, it was completely normal to talk about death all the time. It was just normalized. And I think that when we normalize something, it becomes much less scary to us. And then we also have the benefit of being able to honor the people we love.
Yes.
So it's a win-win. It's
interesting. My daughters, when they started dating, they'd kind of put a disclaimer in there, and they said, well, we're going to go meet my mom. And oh, by the way, if you have dinner with us, there's 2 subjects we're going to be talking about openly. We hope it doesn't make you feel uncomfortable. Our family openly talks about death and sex. So if you have a problem with that, you'll have a problem fitting into our family because they're very taboo topics. But again, you have to talk about them so you can be responsible not only about them, but to them, right? It's a responsibility that we as humans have to take on. And I think it's important that we see that as a responsibility that we all should be mindful to and be more accepting of.
And you know this, you just went through it with your mother. But when you know what your loved one wants and you can do it for them, it's just so much more peaceful. It's not easy. It's never easy. But you at least know you're doing what they wanted, and that takes away so much stress and anxiety. So it's as much for yourself as it is for your loved ones.
Yeah, it truly is. And I one of the things I look back on, I didn't have to worry about, oh, did mom want to be buried or cremated? Oh, did mom want this or what that? I knew because my mom and I talked openly about it. And I even joked one time with her, and I said, Mom, she was getting further advanced in her dementia phases and stuff. And I was giving her her favorite candy, which is Necco's. And she only took one. My mom could eat a whole pack in 5 minutes. But this time, she's got to the point where she could maybe just roll one of them around in her mouth for a little bit, and then she'd spit it out. And I just remember, kind of putting it in my hand and kind of shaking it at her. And I said, you know what, Mama? I promise you, when you pass away, everyone at your funeral is getting a roll of Necco's. And because I spoke those words, and she chuckled at it. So to me, that chuckle, that laugh that she had was kind of like an affirmation of, I think that's a neat idea that you're going to do for me. And I did it. And I look back on that. I have no regrets because I had those conversations with her throughout the latter parts of her years. I had her urn. I must have had her urn for like 7 years. I brought this beautiful urn home that I had got at a convention, and she was just enamored with it. She just thought it was the most beautiful thing she ever saw. And I said, do you want it to be your urn, Mama? And she said, yes, I would love to be in that. Sat in her house forever and ever. Now she's finally in it. And she knew where she was going. So I thought that was also beautiful.
Yeah.
And like I said, I look back on everything I did for my mother. And yes, I'm in the profession. So people probably listening say, oh, well, you're in the profession. You already thought about it. You already knew what to do and stuff like that. So to be honest with you, when you are in the profession and it is that close to home, you are just as lost as somebody who's not in the profession. But it was helpful in those conversations because that's what I tapped into when I was found kind of like in a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't think like a funeral director. I was emotionally distraught like a daughter, like a family member. And so I held on to those conversations. I held on to that information that we shared with each other. And I made sure that is what was brought to the table. That is what we talked about. That's what we made sure that the funeral directors put on as a request to have done for her funeral. And like I said, I look back on it and I have no regrets, none whatsoever. It's because we had those conversations.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, it really, truly was. And another thing you were talking about before is how you were talking about how, I apologize, the name of your guest was talking about not being afraid of death. What was her name?
Ashley Kirkham.
Yeah, Ashley Kirkham. And it brought a thought into my mind is that, I've been asked several times because obviously where I work and what I do at the museum here, and they would ask me, are you afraid of dying? And I said, no, actually, I'm not afraid of dying at all. I've seen people die. I've seen what death looks like, and it's rather peaceful, So I'm not afraid of dying. Truly what I'm afraid of is how I'm going to die, right? Yeah. Because I don't know that part, and I don't know if it's going to be, a slow, painful death, if it's going to be a sudden death, is it going to be a death that I know is coming in those instants, or is it something where I might just go to sleep and never wake up? So it's not that I'm afraid to die, because death can be rather peaceful. It's just the mode of death. How am I going to get there? Kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's one of the other things that I think is really important to talk about with family members, which is obviously if something happens immediately, there's nothing to talk about. But if you have something like dementia or some chronic illness, you can say, these are the things I want you to do for me, and these are the things I would like you to not do for me, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want my life prolonged if I can't eat by myself, or I can't watch my favorite baseball game, whatever it is. Everybody has their thing, right?
Right, exactly. But then again, they have to understand there's some limitations, right?
Of course.
There are true limitations, always, I don't want to suffer, or I don't want to be, I don't want to be bedridden. I don't want to be cared for strangers. And as hard as it is, we don't get to euthanize people like we do pets, and it's unfortunate. So the best thing that you can do is be educated about what your loved one is going through and what steps there are to try and help make them as comfortable as possible, because you cannot speed up the process. There are medical procedures and stuff and medical interventions that you can undertake to help, prolong their life. But at what point do you say, okay, enough is enough?
Right.
And that's also a hard decision to make. And that's where sometimes you just got to look to the professionals and get them to help you understand what's going on. And I'll be honest, I had a lot of, I was seeing the writing on the wall, and I swear I was with an eraser right behind it, and I was erasing what was on the wall, and call that selfish. I was very selfish. I wasn't ready for my mom to go, but at the same time, I felt like there were times that the process was out of my control, but sometimes I felt some of it was in my control. So it was a very delicate balance, and it was a hard journey to go through. But I think it's important that you do talk about what you want in the best case scenario, right? If all the stars align and you can have, the most textbook death as possible, then yes, put it down on paper. But sometimes it doesn't always happen that way.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. So we can talk about, what we want for the end of life and stuff like that, knowing that it may change, and that's okay too. Sometimes when you get to that moment, it's easier to talk about it when you're not there, right? And then when you get to that moment, you're like, well, maybe I want to change my mind, and that's okay too.
Absolutely.
People need to understand that it's okay, Just like it's okay to invite your guests over to the house if your house is not spotless, right? It's okay. I think there are a lot more things in life that are much more accepted than we give credit for. And talking about death, coming together at the table, enjoying each other's company for what we're truly here on this planet for, right, is for each other. Because we're humans. Yeah. We like to be around people, to be connected. But I think there's a lot of unfortunate situations in our society that has caused us to disconnect. And I really, really profoundly think that you are on a truly needed mission of getting people back together around the table to have all those conversations, whether they're fun, whether they're hard, whether they're just to get to know each other all over again. And in 5 years, get to know each other again. We need to do that.
Well, thank you. I couldn't agree more. It's so important. I mean, we need each other. We actually need each other. And we just have to re-find each other.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Re-find each other. I like that word. Re-find each other, and do it in a way that puts us in each other's presence, like physical presence, right? And set that dinner table, whether it's with the fine china, the paper plates, whatever it is. It doesn't matter, right? Bring it out and bring the people together. And it doesn't matter whether that food is palatable or not. It's all in the concept of you tried, right? It's the, what do they say? It's the act of, right? That means the most.
Yeah. It's just creating the space for the people to be together. It's all
exactly.
It is.
Yeah. Well, Ashley, I could talk to you forever. I do want listeners to know about your website, because you have a fascinating website with some beautiful pieces. And also, I know that you and I are, so I'm sorry, first, go ahead and talk about your website.
Okay, well, people can find us at ameaten.com. I'm going to spell it because it's French. It's www.ameatendre.com. So come check it out.
Yes, you got some beautiful pieces there, and I am, truly grateful for the gift that you presented to me, and I cannot wait to enjoy it and have conversation with it. And then also, I know that you're working on a death box. That it's a little project that we're trying to work on a little together, and hopes to bring it out to the museum and the gift shop. Tell us a little bit about your death box.
Okay, so the idea, this came from another book that was written by a palliative care doctor. And the whole idea is that when you die, people need to be able to find things like your passwords to your online accounts, your ethical will, hopefully, if you have written one, any important documents or keepsakes. And so the goal is to create a beautiful hand-created wooden box for you to keep all of these things in. And cannot wait to get your feedback and ideas so we can make it something truly special for people.
Yeah, so did this concept by chance of the death box come from the Hope box or the Hope chest, if you're familiar with that?
I don't know the derivation of it. I read about it in one book, which is called The Beginner's Guide to the End. And it's actually it's a wonderful book by a man named B.J. Miller and Shoshana Berger. He is a physician, but he had a terrible accident in college and lost his legs. And that's when he decided to become a physician. So he came very close to death. And I think as a result has just spent a lot of time thinking and helping people through this process. And they are the ones who suggested it's sort of a step-by-step process to go through. And one of the things they suggest is having some sort of death box. But I love the idea. And honestly, I think you could call it a life box. You don't have to call it a death box, right? It's really a place for you to put the most important and meaningful things and to make things easier for your loved ones when you die, because we all want to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I totally agree, because sometimes I'll catch myself. I'm like, I can't die yet. I haven't put my death box together. I haven't finished. There's things I haven't finished yet. So I'll have a day, it'll just wake me up and I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this, this, and this, because, if I were to die, it would leave my children in there's enough information that has been, I should say, communicated, that they understand a lot of things, but then there's still a lot of things that may have been communicated, but won't be remembered. Right. And so that needs to go in there. Right. So I find myself going, oh my God, I can't die yet. I have things that I still have to finish to leave behind for my children to help them understand in the absence of my death. So my mom and I did a really good job making sure everything was buttoned up. And I really am behind the power curve and making sure things are buttoned up, because I'm not promised tomorrow. Nobody is. So I think it's important for not only for me to have those more of those conversations, but to get my life box together. So upon my death, my children know what they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. Once again, like I said, we could talk for hours.
Such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to collaborate with you some more on the life/death box, however we want to call it. We haven't figured it out yet, right? We'll get there, though, figure it out. But we'll make it meaningful for people to want to embrace and have it and actually feel it. Because it's one thing to get the box, but it's a whole nother to feel it, right?
Yeah,
it's one thing to set the table, but it's another whole thing to come together. So
well said. So well said.
Yeah. So, well, thank you again so much. And hopefully we'll be back again on some more fun topics that are about death.
Sounds amazing. Thank you, Genevieve.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me today on this podcast. And I hope that you will share this episode with family and friends. We look forward to any feedback you have to offer by giving us a review on Apple or Spotify. And always remember, any day above ground is a good one.